If companies are not fulfilling the promises of their financial models, they need to ground themselves in reality today. Like I said, you have to get out of denial, accept the realities of the market, and right size the company and the plan in a way that you can make strategic decisions that are appropriate to the place that the company is. And that means hard choices. It means validating our instincts with data. It means thinking about resource allocation and having a clear strategy that can become your true north for making decisions.
What's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of The Dime. I'm Brian Fields, and with me, as always, is Kellen Finney. And this week, we got a very special guest, AnnaRae Grabstein, founder, podcast host, advisor. AnnaRae, thanks for taking the time. How you doing today?
I'm doing so well. Excited to be here with you guys today. Thanks for having me.
Excited to dive in. Kellen, how are you doing?
I'm doing well. Really excited to talk to AnnaRae. I mean, an OG trailblazer on the West Coast. 5th generation, I think, is what she said before we started recording today. So really excited to kind of pick her brain about the whole industry. How are you, Brian?
Yeah, I'm stoked. I think strategy-wise, there's a lot we can kind of all learn from AnnaRae, and maybe we can dive into a little more specifics and apply it to some of these companies that probably could use her help immediately. But it's really important before we kind of get a East Coast, West Coast battle. Let's separate, where we're from originally and just focus on small parts of the world, specifically during the fall when it's beautiful out. If there was a specific location, East or West Coast, that you'd prefer to be during that time frame, where would that be?
Well, the fall is harvest season. So I think that I have to split my answer right down the middle and say that I would love to be on the mountain in the Emerald Triangle in the fall in California, or I would love to be underneath some beautiful trees in Northeast and upstate New York in the fall. But like Kellen said, I'm 5th generation born in California in my family. So my roots are really deep in California, and it's where I got my start in the industry. And so I always will be loyal to that. But I mean, you can't ignore the East Coast and certainly New York. So big ups to you guys.
I love the fair, impartial PC answer. So for our listeners unfamiliar about you, can you give us kind of that quick moment in time where you realized you wanted to be a part of the cannabis industry?
That quick moment in time. I have been working in cannabis and around cannabis since 2004, which is when I left UC Santa Cruz, which is where I did my undergrad. I was invited to spend a season in Mendocino County on an outdoor cannabis farm. And I met people that season that became my chosen family and my closest friends. And it really was the harbinger to a really long journey of me exploring what the business opportunity was for me, for the industry, and to create professional and legitimate kind of long-term opportunities in the space.
I love it. And I can only imagine some of the experiences along the way that you've witnessed, ideas and things that have transpired, and some of the optimism and hope that you had hoped would have been accomplished when you first got started, and then see kind of the back and forth. So I think we should start specifically with consumers, because I think most industries are understood built for them and how that works. So the market is shaped by consumers. I love that you sent that to me. What does that mean for you?
Well, so I think that the market being shaped by consumers is a part of remembering and acknowledging that there's massive amounts of change that are just an inherent part of the cannabis industry maturing. And we see that right now with what is happening with the medical and adult use regulated cannabis space and the hemp market and the state-by-state patchwork. And people talk about the cannabis industry and the hemp industry. And I'm just going to say it. It's one industry because it's the consumer is where we need to be anchored. And it's the consumer that's flowing between these two spaces and doesn't really understand or have a good reason to understand the difference between them.
So how then do operators who operate vastly differently work together in competition to attract the consumer? And then how does the government or the industry educate the consumer to understand the differences of the product so that we can all kind of work in unison together to provide safe, access for consumers, which in my opinion is the ultimate goal.
Well, so acknowledging that the consumer is the anchor doesn't mean that every company should be in hemp and cannabis. And I also don't necessarily think that it's the consumer's role to understand where their product is coming from and if it's hemp or if it's cannabis and what the ingredient is. It's way overcomplicated from a consumer perspective. I think that it's just that when I say this, what I'm leaning into is that regulatory navigation is a part of a holistic business strategy. If you create a certain type of product, let's say that you are an edible maker, you think about where you can be based on your skill set, on your supply chain, on all of those things. And so if you're in the regulated adult use cannabis space, you can operate within the four walls of the state that you're in. If you are operating in the hemp space, you might be able to manufacture in one place and have interstate commerce that's sending your products from place to place. But the anchor is the consumer. It's not the regulatory navigation. The regulatory navigation is what is creating your go-to-market strategy of where you can sell, how you can sell, and different strategies that kind of are going to get you into the hearts and minds of the person that's going to fuel your growth.
The hemp and the cannabis industry are essentially similar because the expertise required for operators to produce the products are almost identical, right? And so, again, the regulatory framework's different. So why wouldn't companies just operate in both spaces now with the same teams, right? It just sounds like paperwork, but it's not. Like, why is this so challenging?
Yes, some do operate in both spaces. And I think that that is a really great strategy because I think that companies that are in hemp that aren't looking at adult use are being short-sighted because regulations are coming, even if they don't currently have them. And so not being afraid of regulations as a part of your business is really important. But it also isn't necessarily right for every company to be operating in both spaces, depending on where they're at. I think that understanding the difference between going deep and going wide as a company is really important. And if you're in a market that has a lot more depth in it, focusing on that market and going deeper into it is a really strong focus. And there is a lack of access to capital, as we know, in cannabis. So really looking at how your resources are best spent is critically important. That said, I think it oversimplifies it to say that it's the same. Kellen, I don't think you said that it's exactly the same, but yes, manufacturing processes are similar. Like if you're making a THC infused edible, you're going to be doing a similar process, whether you're doing it in adult use cannabis or you're doing it on hemp. But distribution channels and the way that consumers are accessing these products are very different on the two different sides of the space. So when I say it's one industry, it's not that it's one industry today that is holistic and travels back and forth smoothly, but it's more of a long-term philosophy about access to cannabinoids being something that consumers want and companies needing to understand that their customers are participating in both sides of this market. And so ignoring it or thinking that you're one or the other is short-sighted. Like in the hemp space, you're seeing a lot more of utilization of existing alcohol rails for distribution and people targeting alcohol beverage pathways as a path to market. And so that actually is a very different skill set that we're seeing a lot of folks that are coming in from craft beer or spirits and people that have familiarity with those supply chains have a lot of success on the hemp side. Whereas in cannabis, you are dealing with much more closed supply chains. It's not the traditional environment. It's like, okay, if you're a wholesaler in cannabis, all you can sell into is the licensed dispensaries in the state market that you're in. And that is a different skill than looking at the entire alcohol space and trying to figure out where the best place for your hemp beverage is and who are the distributors that are going to get you into that channel. But on the manufacturing side, yes, lots of parallels.
I mean, honestly, it's kind of unique because if you were operating in both spaces, you could treat your cannabis operations almost like a pilot plant, right? Like it's much smaller, much closed systems, right? Your margins are going to be a lot tighter. And so like if it's successful in cannabis, then when you go to hemp, yes, it's different, right? But there's also like different problems from a scaling standpoint, from manufacturing and everything else that you just mentioned, right? So I think that you could look at it as like pilot programs that you're running for like your beverage in the cannabis space, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I have watched in awe and been really excited at different times as innovation and things that have happened in cannabis have left cannabis and gone into other spaces, because for a long time people thought that we had to take talent from outside cannabis in and bring them in, and now we're getting to see things that start in cannabis and go elsewhere. And like, so an example is that there's been a lot of really exciting cultivation technology that was created specifically for the cannabis market, but then has been able to go outside of cannabis into different agricultural technologies for greenhouse and stuff. And I think that there's a lot of talk going on right now about existing cannabis companies looking at trying to grow their total addressable market by going into hemp. That makes sense because we know that the cannabis market is sort of at this place where there's not a lot of revenue growth in the existing markets and not a lot of new states are coming on. But for hemp companies to look at getting into the adult use cannabis space, I think is really interesting because that shows a different skill set. Whereas cannabis companies going into the hemp side are just thinking, oh, wow, this is so simple. Now we can streamline our manufacturing and we can go over state lines. For a hemp company to flex into going into the regulated market shows a courage and fearlessness to make sure that they're also growing their total addressable market into the places that they aren't already, which I find to be really interesting.
Do you see that happening more and more, or is that something that you anticipate to be happening going forward?
I don't see it happening more and more. I do see some groups exploring it that are having foresight, and there are some companies that are on both sides of the market, but most of those have started in the adult use medical cannabis space and then are expanding into hemp. So I don't know, give me a call if you're a hemp company and you're expanding into the regulated space. I want to hear from you. I'm interested.
One question I would have about the regulated market is that you've got states like Pennsylvania that are waiting to come on. You got states like Illinois that are heavily MSO driven, that are really, really competitive, and Massachusetts also. Those companies that operate there are forced to fight within the walls of that state, and they would love the opportunity to serve customers in New York, customers in New Jersey, customers in California, vice versa, California outsource. So do you think that is a limitation of the companies just based on the rules and regs that are outside of their control, and that them being forced to fight into the hemp market because they want to is just based on the rules that are at play versus, let's say, just being inefficient?
So I think the first step of really winning in cannabis and being an executive and a leader that is going to be a strategic innovator in cannabis is accepting the market realities that are right in front of us and getting out of denial about the things that we hoped and dreamed and wished it could be. So, are there complicated restrictions if you put a bunch of money into investing in Pennsylvania and you still can't serve the adult use market and you're limited in terms of the form factors that you can create? And does that suck for you? Absolutely, it does. Is that something that you can control? Not really. You can certainly go and lobby to Josh Shapiro and all the other legislators in Pennsylvania that have your destiny at their fingertips with their policy changes that are in front of you. But there are all kinds of irrational restrictions that exist in the cannabis market, some more rational than others. And in order to win in the space, accepting the realities of the market is just a part of it. And so when you understand the opportunities and the constraints of the regulatory and legal environment, then you can set a plan to navigate it and to win through it. And that is coming back to regulatory navigation as a critical aspect of understanding business opportunity. But the anchor still becomes the consumer. It's like if you're in Pennsylvania thinking about that, then you still need to, you understand what the rules of the road are, but what does the consumer want? And then how can you still serve them with the opportunities that you do have?
Well, I think that's where the complexity becomes so difficult is I would assume that some of these operators that came in earlier on, especially in Illinois, didn't model in outside industry people like in the hemp coming in and taking consumers' dollars, because I think when we think about consumers' dollars, they spend on the category, and exactly like you said, it's roughly the same category, just product form, which to each their own. And that's where I think the modeling has become so difficult for these companies, that they forecasted out kind of like a protective environment. And now here comes beverage coming in and saying, okay, we've got unit economics across the United States, so we can sell now down, get our COGS down as low as possible, and get our margins up, where these other operators are just dying to unlock that same total addressable market.
I'd push back on the concept that hemp beverage is displacing opportunity for Illinois operators.
I was just giving an example.
I will say, and I think it just brings up a good point, which is just that, there are right fit channels for right fit product, and high potency THC products do make sense to be in a more regulated environment. And so I don't want to confuse people. I don't want people to think that I am advocating for highly intoxicating, unregulated products to have widespread access to people that don't have confidence in the safety of their products. However, it has been shown over all of the years of adult use legalization that beverages specifically do not sell in dispensaries. So beverages being available outside of the dispensary environment are not displacing or harming existing cannabis dispensaries. Competition with things like THCA flower and vapes and things like that, I think you can make an argument for that. Are those the reasons that companies in Illinois' financial models are not coming to fruition? I would say no. I think that, and you might have heard me say this before, but I think that there has been a lot of financial pornography in the projections that cannabis companies have created over the years. And fantasy is a great thing. Everyone needs a little bit of fantasy in their life. But we are not in a place where this industry has unlimited growth opportunity ahead, and that any company that's starting from scratch or that's growing into a new market can have confidence that they are going to go in and take a 10% market share of that market, be it Illinois or elsewhere. And so if companies are not fulfilling the promises of their financial models, they need to ground themselves in reality today. Like I said, you have to get out of denial, accept the realities of the market, and right-size the company and the plan in a way that you can make strategic decisions that are appropriate to the place that the company is. And that means hard choices. It means validating our instincts with data. It means thinking about resource allocation and having a clear strategy that can become your true north for making decisions. Yeah.
Speaking of data, I mean, like hemp and cannabis, eventually they'll be the same. And one could argue that we were seeing stagnant growth in the cannabis industry. And from a macro perspective, it's all just about consuming cannabinoids, right? So I don't know the answer to this. This is my question, but has there been a significant total revenue growth for cannabinoid consumption with now the hemp industry becoming more prevalent as beverages now go into these kind of traditional markets that don't have a robust medical industry, right? You could argue that it's actually been really good for total growth of cannabinoid consumption, which is good for the whole industry in the long term. Right. And it helps change cultural stigma, because it sounds like hemp is getting people to try the same product just because it doesn't have the name cannabis.
Yeah, absolutely. So the hemp market has unquestionably created massive market opportunity in the cannabinoid space overall. So even if the adult use regulated space is sticking at this $30 billion a year sort of top line revenue number, the hemp market has been growing exponentially. And there's been a lot of talk about what's happening in Texas right now, because Texas is considering bans, it's considering regulation, it's considering expanding their medical marijuana program. It's kind of looking at a whole bunch of different things. And depending on when this comes out, we might know the answer. I don't know. But there is absolutely growth of cannabinoid consumers that are happening because of hemp. And I think that one of the consumer profiles that's most compelling is kind of me. It's like the yoga mom, because in cannabis, and I've been in it, like I said, for a pretty long time, when adult use markets were first opening up, when we were building brands in California in 2016 and 2017, people were talking about these women-centric brands and the soccer mom and low-dose products. And the reality is that those consumers never materialized in the dispensary channel at all. And by and large, those brands did not find strong footing and the same level of growth as different types of hype, lifestyle, high potency brands. But what we are seeing in the hemp space is that those consumers are the ones that are purchasing product. And I think a lot of that has to do with, we do know that women do make most of the purchasing decisions in their households and are the ones that go to the grocery store and things like that. And so if you are putting products at the places where those women are, then you're more likely to bring them in. And I think that that's a really good thing ultimately for the industry. I think that the movement away from alcohol is also reinforcing kind of this moment in time and the curiosity around alcohol alternatives. But as more states put in place regulatory environments for high potency products, most likely in a dispensary type environment, I also believe that what we're doing is opening up a pathway towards people becoming more curious or maybe more willing to go to a dispensary because they've tried a product and had a good experience or realized that they didn't get so high that they might be open to trying other things. The other thing I want to say about data on hemp is that there is becoming more and more understanding that some of the more high potency products, though, in the beverage channel are the ones that are getting more sell through. So the difference between like a 2.5 milligram beverage and a 10 milligram beverage, there is more sell through of the 10 milligram beverages. And the 2.5 milligram beverage might be the one that's the on-ramp that someone wants to try. But as people try them, they want to feel something. That's just the reality. People want to feel it.
No, I love it. I think that approach is so smart. It's so not intimidating. And I think for me, every time I go somewhere, instead of bringing alcohol, which is like a normal path I always done, I now bring the low dose beverages and people's eyes open every time. Oh my God, there's THC in this. I can get high. Yeah, very lightly, but they see that and they feel more comfortable trying it again. And you've hit the nail on the head. People start going back the second time and go, I want to feel something. I felt comfortable with the 2.5. I can try the 10.
Mm-hmm.
So I want to ask your opinion because you've been in this space for 20 years. You've seen constant up and downs. Given how the hemp is operating now, how do you foresee the right approach for these states in order to have a safe, regulated market where the products can be tested and people can feel comfortable? What would you advise to Texas or someone else that came in and said, AnnaRae, how do we set this up so that businesses can succeed here and we can make it a good environment?
I think that in every state, I would hope that there's some level of access to cannabinoids and that is happening within some sort of regulated environment. And I think that an easy path in the short term is to look at the hemp market being for non-inhalables and more low-dose products like 10 milligrams and less. And non-inhalables. So looking at things like edibles and beverages. And that for consumers that want to partake in inhalable products, that they would go into a more regulated environment that has more age verification and safety standards and things like that, which looks more like what we have today in the dispensary channel. The reality is that most states are kind of choosing one path or the other. And I think that a world where there is adult use dispensaries that are for the more heavy users and for people that want to go to dispensaries and want to be able to explore dabs and infused joints and all the stuff that is out there for people, but that also is able to provide widespread access to the products that we're seeing proliferating in the hemp space that still have some type of safety standards is kind of the utopian path, because that provides the most access and the most flexibility. And that we ultimately need to look at regulation becoming a little bit less in some of the state markets to make it easier for businesses to operate and to succeed. And obviously, federal policy change is something that a lot of people want and hope for and all of that. But we just don't have any crystal balls. And every time we think we're getting close, we seem to take 2 steps back. And at this point, I'm just not holding on for that. I think that this is still going to be sitting with the states for a pretty long time. So I hope that there is some states that we can really point to and say they're doing it right. It's possible that that might be what happens with Minnesota. I had been looking to Minnesota for a while in hopes that it was going to land in a place that is what I just described. But they've been really slow to turn on their adult use market. So I'm starting to lose some confidence in Minnesota, but there still is hope for them.
I love that approach. It's logical, it's thoughtful, it's considerate of both sides. And I would wonder if that is part of the grounded in reality concepts that you were referring to when you're talking about some of those other cannabis operators who need to get away from the financial pornography. I love that we're going to just say it just so I can say it out loud. And then really ground themselves in reality of what is today and what the market could look like in the future, given the unknown to the left and the unknown to the right. Is that kind of what you had in mind?
Yeah.
So how then does that approach take Hassan? Does a company that's a larger MSO have to double down on all their understandings of making data-driven decisions and locking in all of their numbers so that each product SKU should have a total COGS and we remove the total guesswork? Or do you think right now they're doing all that and that there's none of those issues to be had? How efficient are these cannabis companies with understanding their true numbers?
Is it okay to laugh when I say that? If the question is how good are cannabis companies at understanding their true numbers, it's a very wide spectrum. And in my advisory work, I definitely work with companies that are extremely good at understanding their product level margins, their cost of production, understanding the way that their SG&A kind of contributes overall to the company's performance at the end of the year. And I also see companies that have absolutely no idea the way that discounts and distribution costs and all of their SG&A is pulling down the performance of their company as well. And so all of this just comes back to this idea of the importance of being a leader that can drive purpose and mission at a high level to understand why a company exists, what its focus is, what are the major big top line objectives that can get all of the people inside the company rallying behind a mission. But that ultimately, like having quantitative goals that we can track, measure, and watch throughout a company's performance is the thing that's going to help us to actually win in the market. And I think that a company that is looking at the whole market and thinks that because the market exists, we have to be in every part of it is operating from a place of not being very creative, to be honest. Just trying to capture market share as opposed to being really good at certain things. And winning at them it's 2 different approaches. And I think that we're seeing most of the top 5 MSOs launch hemp beverages, and it doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to win at them just because they're a top cannabis company. Do they have the knowledge and the understanding of those distribution channels? Are they going to dedicate the resource to building that out? And ultimately, does it make sense for them to do that? Or are there other areas of their business that they could be going deeper in? And this concept of going deep versus going wide is something that I come back to all the time in my work of helping companies to kind of think through what's next for them. Where does it make sense to go next?
Can you give us an example of like going deep in a market versus going wide? Going wide, of course, is like expanding to new territory. Going deep, is that like expanding your product SKU in one state? Would that be like a good example of something like that?
Yeah, I'll give 2 examples. I'll give an example of if you are a California wholesale brand, and I'll give an example of being a hemp beverage company. So the difference of going deep versus going wide, if you're a California brand that currently is wholesaling into a bunch of dispensaries, the California market only has certain dispensaries that pay their bills. And so if you're a brand and you have figured out that there's 300 dispensaries that you work with that pay your bills, and that the other 700 dispensaries don't pay their bills, you don't really want to go wide into trying to work with those other companies. So maybe you're a pre-roll company and you're selling into these 300 companies, you can go deeper by figuring out how to increase and have bigger, deeper relationships with the existing 300 customers that you're working with today. How do you do that? Well, you expand what you sell them in various different ways so that you can sell them more, because you know that you have a limited set of potential customers, and the way that you're going to win is by selling those customers more, as opposed to selling the same products that you have now to more customers, which would be going wide, which is a risk that doesn't make sense in that market, because going wide means that you're going to be selling to people that might not pay their bills. The difference, if we take that to like a hemp beverage might be saying going wide is going to be creating a DTC strategy where we're going to be selling direct to consumer across the whole market on the internet to anyone in any state that we can mail a package to, or maybe just to the ones that are allowed to purchase hemp beverages online. Whereas going deep would be saying, hey, we want to launch and win in Atlanta, and we're going to partner with a distributor in Atlanta, and we're going to deploy brand ambassadors to all of the accounts that we close in Atlanta, and we are going to win the Atlanta consumer. And from there, we're going to look at the outskirts, and we're going to try to strategically move into places that are adjacent to the market that we've now won. And we're going to take a regional approach to our growth. Or with distribution, of making a distribution deal that's going to go into 10 states at once. And you're just going to be launching in those 10 states, but you're not necessarily going to be supporting the sell-through in the same way as if you really focused on one market. Both strategies are valid. It just depends on the market dynamics. It depends on your resources and what the strategy is, the way you want to lead.
Yeah, that's what I was going to bring up. The California one is such a perfect example. It's like, sure, maybe your metric of success before was we got to be in as many dispensaries as possible so we can show growth. Now you're focusing on, this is the profitable growth that we have. This is the areas that we feel most successful in. We should double down on what makes us most successful so that as the industry evolves, we can continue to accelerate our business. I'd imagine that there's so many of these other companies who have worked so hard to grow as fast as humanly possible, have these little pockets of their business that are complete black holes. They've got no idea what their costs are. They've got no idea what their revenue growths are. They're just kind of estimating here and there, and that they might be better as a whole of just saying, okay, either we can figure out what our numbers are and it makes sense for us, or if not, we have to get rid of that and move on and double down on what we do best. Do you think that is going on? That type of internal analysis is currently going on at these larger companies, or you think it needs to be going on?
It's 100% going on. There are a number of really good companies in the mature markets, California, Colorado, Oregon, and Washington, that have been doing this work for the past couple years, really focusing on understanding the costs to run their business, really reconciling who are the customers that are worth working with, and figuring out a strategy to best serve them, and also getting real about what that means about their potential size and growth within the market that exists. So yes, absolutely, companies are doing it. There is a need to do it, because you can't just keep burning money forever. There are definitely groups that aren't, but they're learning the hard way. And if you're going to survive, this is the way to do it. So yeah.
This is where the leadership is so critical, right? Because it's not enough just for a leader to get up there and talk about it. It has to be in the culture, in the DNA. So it's no longer reactive decision-making. It is proactive decision-making.
That's right.
When we talk about profitability and these companies understanding their true nuances for success, do you think technology and automation can make a bigger difference for these companies? Because in our opinion, there's areas and there's gaps in the visibility, and a lot of that is based on not utilizing outside industry's best practices. Do you think some operators can pull from outside industry, oil and gas, big ag, and try to implement technology tools internally to try to help with some of those blind spots?
Yeah, technology is critically important across every aspect of the cannabis supply chain. And I think there has been a move towards more integrated tech stacks, which I think has been really interesting to see over the past 18 months, especially like on the retail side, which is one of the most tech-heavy aspects in the cannabis space. I will say that I have not really seen an ERP and manufacturing technology that has won yet, and it absolutely creates an opportunity. I was the COO of a meat company for a few years. It was my little short-term sabbatical from cannabis in my career path. And there was a lot of choice when it came to the technology that we would use to monitor and watch the business in that space. And there is a lot of technology in cannabis, but it also has a long way to go. But sure, best practices are going to be deploying technology to create efficiency, to best put the humans to work doing the things that the humans do best.
How do they balance, like, within the cannabis industry? I think there's like 3 different tiers, right? From a company perspective, right? There's companies that have creative accounting that are able to access capital for like capital equipment purchases under like standard interest rates that you would get if you were a normal business in America, right? But then there's like the other tiers of cannabis companies that are smaller, right? That are trying to grow, but then they don't have access to the same capital, right? The banking, all these other issues. So then, like, from a strategy perspective, how would you advise them to kind of like balance the investment in technology when it can be really expensive and the ROI can be 4 or 5 years, 10 years down the line, right? With the limited resources and still trying to like understand if they need to go deeper or wider?
I mean, if it's going to take you 4 or 5 years to see ROI on something and you have limited resources, I'm probably going to advise you not to do it, and to really look at what you have right in front of you and to be able to create a business that can be profitable with what you have.
The ERP manufacturing technologies, you said it wasn't so available. Nothing is one. Why do you think that is?
I think it's really complicated in cannabis because it is a plant, is what you're starting with, and that plant has many different outputs, be it stems and A-bud flower and leaf and all of the different aspects of the plant. And then those things are going to get divided and put to different places, and tracking them and creating value, but also the efficiency of slowing down in order to speed up. I've seen from my own experience leading a cannabis company that when we deployed an ERP, it created a whole bunch of data entry and human work that we weren't anticipating. And that can be really hard in a restrained resource environment. And for a company to make an investment in more labor, to be doing more data collection, needs to have a direct correlation to performance. And I think that ultimately it will. I just want solutions that are effective and that work and actually deliver that value and don't just increase resource needs.
It's a super hard balance, right? The tool has to come in easy, ready to use. It has to adapt into the workflow, and the operators then have to utilize it without it adding extra hours to their time. In essence, the tool is supposed to save hours of their time so that everyone can become more quote unquote efficient. And then the next level that we've seen is that the data that comes from the tool, if it's not applied and it's not utilized correctly, then the tool readily is minimized in its true value for the company because the data then is just sitting idle.
That's right.
How do you even like discuss ROI with something that's just essentially like managing data that they're already trying to like deal with from an analysis perspective in the first place, right? Like these ERP systems that like Walmart uses and other really large industries, right? Like Walmart has an ERP system that tracks all of their lettuce, for example, right? Especially because of like E. coli outbreaks and those kind of things. And so like the cost associated with that, how do you justify the cost associated with like a crazy ERP system like Walmart would utilize for a cannabis company, right? Is it something where you have like recalls? Is that something like the labor aspect, right? Like how do you quantify all this stuff? You know what I mean?
I think companies need to be looking at ROI more holistically than one piece of software. And what is that going to give me? It's not going to give you cash in your pocket, most likely, but it is going to give you better tools to understand your business, to track performance, to be able to understand what the levers are that you can pull. And you shouldn't spend too much on deploying technology, but ultimately that technology should be adding to your suite of knowledge that you now know about your business that can help you to identify places for growth, places for efficiency, ways that you could be doing internal transformation to be running a better company.
No, I think that's perfectly said, right? Because it's that blind spot area where you just don't know. And I think, Kellen, from the other perspective, it's that maybe it's hard to quantify the immediate ROI of purchasing a tool, but if your company is highly inefficient and you're not sure where, you can't solve the problem. You're just continuing on the own. And how bad is it? Well, if you don't know, some of these companies could be so bad.
Well, and I think that when you talk about data, it's like data is useful, but what are you doing with the data, right?
Bang.
And so it's about how are you integrating data and market information and all these other things that we've been talking to into a rhythm of business that becomes a part of the DNA of your company. And so that's in my work, I talk a lot about rhythm of business. It's a concept that I really like. And within that, it's like, what are the things that people inside of your company can depend on? And how much of that has to do with information sharing to help unlock creativity? And so looking at using data to create monthly business review processes that include key decision makers or managers and operators in data, to give them data, to help them see different perspectives, to help them to view their work in different ways, and ultimately to become better leaders. That's when it really matters. And that's how you create ROI, is like, not did this piece of software deliver me a 0.5% better margin on the products? That sounds great. But did it actually empower the leaders in my company to make better decisions? Did it help us to see the market in a new way so that we could understand our capacity and our capabilities in a way that was empowering and helped us to step into a new phase of development and maturity as a company?
Yeah, and if it adds us margin, then even better. Like, that's icing on the cake. And the data has allowed us to make better decisions so that we could increase our margins. All right, hard pivot. 1 year from now, what has changed?
1 year from now, not much has changed.
Oh. What about a lot of companies going out of business?
Yes, there is a wave of companies going out of business, and that will continue to happen. There will be more consolidation.
Dream smoking session, 3 people dead or alive.
Scott Galloway, Sarah Blakely, and my grandfather.
Most impactful book.
Oh, geez. Just one?
Just one.
The Signature of All Things.
Favorite under the radar company that you think most are sleeping on?
Pass.
There's a good one. I can see in your face. All right. Talk to us about the podcast. What's the plan going forward? And who has been your favorite guest so far?
Oh, yeah. So people can listen to me opine about all sorts of cannabis information weekly on the High Spirits podcast that I co-host with Ben Larson.
Shout out, Ben.
Oh, yeah. Shout out to Ben. Great co-host and really accountability partner in making content. We have been having conversations, the two of us, about what's going on in the cannabis space for a long time, and we wanted to open up those conversations to an audience that was more than just us. So we've had a really, really good time. And I have just appreciated tremendously how much great feedback we've got from people just wanting to hear more from us and wanting to build community around the conversations. I don't want to say who my favorite guest is because I love them all.
No.
And people should just go and listen for themselves. And I do want to shout out my small but mighty team at Wolfmeyer too, that has given me the freedom and flexibility to explore content making within the context of the work that we're doing with strategy and advisory and consulting in the cannabis space.
I love it. Last question. What question do you wish more people asked you?
One question that I wish more people would ask me is what is qualitative due diligence and how does that play into making smart investment choices in cannabis?
Could we get an answer to that?
Oh, yes. So I think that there has been a general lack of integrating a deep understanding about leadership and strategy into investment decisions. And we talked about financial pornography. I think that there's been a lot of investment choices that have been made on the backs of pro formas that have never come to fruition. And I think that a lot of the most important questions that should be considered as people are thinking about who the winners are going to be in the market have been left out. And those are those qualitative things about who the leaders are that are behind these companies, how are tough decisions made when the shit really hits the fan, how are people thinking about the consumer and their supply chains and their partnerships and who the companies are that they're standing next to. And qualitative due diligence is really doing a deep dive into understanding all of the aspects of a company that are not on a spreadsheet and starting there at a high level and then using the spreadsheet to basically prove what you understood on a qualitative level.
I love it. I love it. That's the perfect way to end. So, AnnaRae, for our listeners, they want to get in touch, they want to learn more, and they need help with their strategy. Where can they find you?
Yeah, I'm really easy to find on LinkedIn. Just search AnnaRae Grabstein. I am there. You can go to our website, wolf-meyer.com, and we've got a mailing list, or you can contact me. And I think I'm just out and about in the industry. So if you see me, come say hi. And I want to get to know what everyone is up to. I look at that as a critical part of my work, is just understanding what everyone is trying to accomplish in the space so that I can be always playing kind of four-dimensional chess to make the right matches and help people come together around the things that matter. I take an approach of really looking at constantly aligning incentives across all people and players and companies and things like that. So
I love it.
yeah, come find me. Tell me what's important to you.
Thanks for taking the time. This was a lot of fun.